What is going on out there, world? It's your boy Tommy on the spot for Watchalong Wrestling. Hopefully everyone is doing well. It is officially SummerSlam week. Your eyes are not deceiving you. Typically here on a Monday-ish, we come at you with a new episode of our Tough Enough Watchalong, but not the case this week because it is SummerSlam week, so we have put our Tough Enough rewatch, which we are right now dead smack in the middle of, on a bit of a hold because we are going to talk about all things SummerSlam. As always, I am joined here by my main man, Steve. Steve, hey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. We just went back to school, so it was an interesting couple of days, as the first couple of days of school, usually are. But we're all excited to be back, and we're all excited to be back in person, 100%. So that's a lot of fun.
It's cool. It's I am obviously I'm heading to SummerSlam this week in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is the most insane preparation. I don't know what I'm doing, but I am going with my wife. I am going with my daughter, and I'm going with my mother. It is the four of us heading on vacation across country to Las Vegas for SummerSlam. So much prep is going into this. So many different ins and outs. The logistics are discussed on an everyday basis. The discussion of whether or not we're going to cancel the trip is discussed on an everyday basis. But we're going. So it's going to be fun, and it's an insane time. But I am fired up, and I'm excited to chat all things SummerSlam with you. Talk about some memories here. It's a show that, when I think about SummerSlam, holds near and dear to my heart for a variety of reasons. Most of our memories here, which we'll kind of have a free-flowing discussion through the years of SummerSlam, are going to be focused on probably our two favorite eras of WWE, that being the Attitude Era and the Ruthless Aggression Era. But you hear about SummerSlam, what are some of the first things that come to your mind?
The very first thing that always comes to my mind is the logo, to be honest. It was, during that late Attitude, early Ruthless Aggression era, when it was like the green and blue, like kind of like very light, beachy kind of colors, like oceany kind of colors. That whole aesthetic is the first thing that comes to my mind, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I definitely can hear it. And it feels like they've kept it relatively similar with some color changes through the years. Yeah. Done some unboxings of some old SummerSlams earlier in the week, and I think on the 99 version, it's like all in black. And then in the 2000 version, it's like really summery and like yellow and green. So it is a really cool logo, to say the least.
Yeah. And SummerSlam always, to me, it felt like WrestleMania without all of the expectations. Right. Because you got that, it is that Super Bowl big time moment where all of the lights, everything are on you. And so I feel like there's so much pressure at WrestleMania to be good. But I always felt like SummerSlam was always like, it was either, sometimes it was, if there was a good storyline that it was kind of carrying over into SummerSlam, or it was kind of that middle, kind of in between period, where you were getting more build-up and you were getting more action and you were getting more stuff that was going, and it was going to, again, culminate at SummerSlam.
Right. No, I can totally see it. Yeah, I think for me, so I think the thought WWE always wanted you to believe was that the number one show of the year was WrestleMania, number two was SummerSlam. For me personally, I always went number one WrestleMania, number two Royal Rumble, number three SummerSlam, because I love the Rumble. And I feel like the Rumble's a show and a match that you could take any friend who doesn't even watch the show, sit them down in front of it, and for an hour, they're counting down, they're seeing everyone, they're, oh, God, I've heard of that guy, or I remember that guy. Great surprises, different things. It's so much fun, and it's such a great match to rewatch. I think anybody can rewatch. I've watched every Rumble probably multiple times, whereas like SummerSlam, to me, I've always liked SummerSlam, but it always felt a little like WrestleMania light. There are some things, though, I enjoyed about SummerSlam in comparison to WrestleMania. One being that it felt like with SummerSlam, they'd be willing to take a chance. You'd be willing to have new guys in there, whether it be Brock Lesnar winning the title for the first time, Randy Orton winning the title for the first time. Maybe some things that didn't work out, like Triple H in there with a match against Eugene on the show. But they'd be willing to try different things that they'd be no way near going near for WrestleMania. And so that I always really appreciated and I enjoyed about SummerSlam.
Yeah, it's actually a really good point about how SummerSlam was always kind of seen as that number two show. So and like you said, they wouldn't dare try and experiment with anything with WrestleMania. You go and you stick to what's almost like a known entity. You know, you have to go with what you know. What you know at least is going to be at least a decent show, if not a really great show. With SummerSlam, there were some brand new things that happened that I think we're going to talk about at some point that kind of did pave the way for the future.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, for me, as I think about SummerSlam itself and the events leading up to it, I think one of the things I really like about SummerSlam is it's always tied into the summer. So there's always a lot of personal things for me that are kind of tied around the SummerSlam event itself. Think back to the very first one. I mean, it's also like it's usually toward the end of the summer. I always feel like I'd always get kind of concerned when WWE would really hype up SummerSlam because then I get really excited for it. But I knew once SummerSlam came, that was the end of the summer. You'd be back in school in 2 weeks, and that was always kind of handle there.
Yeah, but on the flip side, it was one of the very few pay-per-views, at least when we were much younger, that you could actually stay up and watch the whole thing.
Right.
Particularly if I was over at my cousin's, like it was a big one that we would actually go and watch because it was one that we could all stay up late because we didn't have to worry about school the next day. So that was also kind of one of the ones where I've probably watched more often just because of that too.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, you'd be a little tired maybe for camp, but who cares? It's a little different than having to stay awake for history class or something like that.
Yeah, completely different.
Like most of my friends that I met were at camp. So all of us would have watched SummerSlam the night before. You'd got to camp. We'd all be discussing the different angles and different things and getting ready for Raw later that night. So really positive memories there tied into to SummerSlam. And first one for me is actually a little bit back in the Wayback Machine. It was SummerSlam 1991. I was just a little wee Tommy on the spot. And I was probably Tommy in the diapers at this point. And my father actually went to this show. And it was the first time I've ever been cognizant of the idea that you could attend a live pay-per-view because he had called me from the show. He gave me a call. I was either, I guess, from a work phone, maybe, but 91 feels even early for that. So yeah. I'm guessing this had to be in a payphone at the Garden that he called me on because I heard in the background $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase's music. And I remember being like, oh my God. Because for me, we didn't really, I think we either just started the early stages of cable. We didn't order the show, though. Usually somebody else would order and we'd get the tape by the end of the week. So I remember just being like, oh my God, like this is actually going on right now. My dad's there. I need to get to a show. And my dad told me, I'm going to throw a chuckle. I don't know if you remember, Chuckles the candy.
Yeah.
He said, I'm going to throw a chuckle at Ted DiBiase. Watch the show at the tape. We'll watch back and see. And if you watch the show to this day, it's one way you can actually see something carom off DiBiase's body. And it's my dad throwing a chuckle at $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. So that is always one of the ones. But then growing up, for me, it was always, I would then usually be in Florida for the show. So I wouldn't, because my mom would always kind of do a last week of August type family trip to Florida.
Yeah.
Or I'll never forget, I always did whatever I could to avoid spoilers. Someone would spoil the show for me and would crush me into a million pieces. So my dad would order the show. We'd all plan to watch it when we got back. So one year it was SummerSlam 1994, Undertaker versus Undertaker. Because Undertaker, while he has some of the best WrestleMania, he's known as Mr. WrestleMania. I mean, Michaels is, but he has the huge streak at WrestleMania and all these great, wonderful matches. SummerSlam, he's kind of the opposite. He has like the worst matches at SummerSlam. He's been given every slug under the sun to have matches with. And at SummerSlam 94, he wrestles himself, the fake Undertaker. And I remember that was main event, Undertaker versus Undertaker. And somebody said not to give any spoilers away, but the Undertaker wins that match. And I remember so upset, even though, of course, Undertaker.
Right, yeah, of course. Right. Well, because also you're probably expecting that it's actually going to be the real Undertaker that he wins, and that's what they made. So was that? I remember there were some of the fake wrestlers that turned out to be real wrestlers. Was the fake Undertaker one of those, like he was actually a real wrestler also, or was it just some Joe Schmo?
Yeah, so the story is that Undertaker needed time off in 1994, so he gets killed by Yokozuna at Royal Rumble 1994.
Right.
He goes up into the heavens and rises. He's in the casket. There's a casket cam. He rises into the heavens, a moment that petrified me for many years as a kid because I really thought the Undertaker died. And the weeks leading up to this, $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase brings back the Undertaker but it's really the Undertaker. And WWE hires Liam Neeson. Do you know Liam Neeson, the actor?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so he goes on this mission with Domino's, the pizzeria, to find the Undertaker, because Domino's was the sponsor. And they're leading this up to, hey, when is Undertaker going to come back? And he finally finds him. And it's announced the real Undertaker is coming back at SummerSlam. And he's going to go after this imposter. And the imposter ends up returning to WWE years later as Disciples of Apocalypse Chains.
Oh.
From the DOA. I don't know if you remember Chains, Brian Lee.
No, I don't.
DOA was a team. It was like a faction. Crush was the leader of it. He had Chains and Skull and 8-Ball. Skull and 8-Ball kind of remained a team for a while. Two bald guys, and they were like a team. Not a very big popular team, but that's who he ends up being. He's also the guy, Brian Lee, who's thrown off of the scaffolding at an ECW event where Tommy Dreamer knocks him off the scaffold. You've probably seen the clip a million times where this guy falls off a scaffold and proceeds to fall through 50 tables that are stacked up.
Yeah.
That's all. That's probably most known as. So he has an okay career after the show, but that's who he is during the show.
Not like Fake Diesel, who I think was Glenn Jacobs.
That's right. He ends up being
not actually.
Yeah. So it ends up being kind of a deal where it's not anybody who ends up having a long career, but that is the main event of the show. So like the idea that Undertaker is finally coming back from the dead, and Paul Bearer shows up to bring him back from the urn, holds up the urn, Aaron goes crazy, and then Undertaker comes back. This is a bad match and silly as some of the sillier things that WWE has ever done. But at the time, it was a pretty big deal because you're a young kid, and here I was thinking Undertaker had died, and no, he wasn't really dead. Here he is, he's back.
Well, I think that, like kind of we were saying before, it is one of those like kind of more gimmick match oriented pay-per-views, because one of the first things that I remember is the Shane versus Test match.
Oh yes, one of my favorites.
So the lover or leaver match, because Test was at the time dating Stephanie McMahon, and Shane was kind of being that kind of protective big brother type of thing, and that was one of Shane's, like, that was, I think, one of the first times where Shane did the big bump.
Yeah.
Because it was like it was off the top rope into the table.
Yep. And
what was it, the next year or year after that he had the hardcore match with Steve Blackman?
That's right. Yeah.
The humongous plunge off of the Titantron, and like.
Yeah, Shane McMahon quickly became one of my favorites. The match with Test I loved. Talked about this when I did my unboxing of 1989 SummerSlam. It's the only thing I really remember from that show. Yeah. And I always was and I know you also like him too, such a big fan of Test. And I feel like they could have done so much more with him at the time, with the whole deal where he's marrying Stephanie McMahon. Triple H interrupts to prove that he's really been the one to steal Stephanie away. And Test never even really gets his revenge. It kind of just transforms into a deal where it's Triple H against Vince McMahon. And it's kind of a crazier type of deal that these two guys are doing. And Test never really becomes much of anything in WWE.
Well, I mean, you do have a couple of years later when he was, with Albert, when they were TNA with Trish Stratus.
True.
So he was always one of those, like, kind of go-to if you need a big guy to pull off a good match. Right. Because as much as, there were a rash of big wrestlers that weren't very good, I feel like Test was one of those that he was actually he was dependable in the ring.
Oh yeah. I mean, and even thinking about SummerSlam, at 2002 he fights the Undertaker.
Yeah,
match that's probably most well remembered for it being the first SummerSlam after 9/11. So when Undertaker wins the match, he's the American Badass. He takes the American flag out and holds it up, and obviously gets the win. But I really love that match. That match, Test versus Shane McMahon, is a great match. And then, you're right, 2000, which is one of the shows that people love and remember very dearly, goes to Shane McMahon going off and facing off against Steve Blackman and taking this insane, 50 feet drop. I mean, and of course, it went from it looked insane when it happened. I understand there was probably crash pads or something, but there's so many ways that could have went wrong. Yeah,
and that's I feel like that's always the thing where it's even those like your, hardcore, oh, I know this is all, like orchestrated and pretend and all that stuff. That is one of those things that anytime you knew that he was going to take a big bump from then on. It was just a matter of what was it going to be. And he kept trying to push the envelope type of thing. And still, like, as much as he is, the boss's son, and as much as he's probably gone through all of this training, he still isn't the kind of like, he's not Jeff Hardy. He's not somebody that does it on a weekly basis.
Right.
So that was, I feel like, always the other side of like, oh God, like.
Yeah, and I remember when he came back in 2016, and everyone was saying he had a match with the Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania 32, and they had moved the Hell in a Cell higher, I think, just to make it more visually appealing on television.
Yeah.
A lot of people were saying, "Oh, it's too high. He's not going to jump off something that high." And I was like, "Oh no, he's going to find a way."
Oh,
he did, and this became like his thing. Was like one of these deals where it's like, he picks up so much speed and he comes down so hard. And I mean, for him, yeah, as you said, he's not on TV every week, so he can do these bumps and then take a few minutes take a few months off to recover before he comes back and does it again. But yeah, Shane does. He, 1999 and 2000, I think he steals both those shows. He almost becomes, a little bit of maybe a SummerSlam MVP of those years. But in looking at that SummerSlam 2000 show, which a lot of people look at for that, and then for also a couple other things, one of the things that always jumps out to me, and I don't know if you even remember this, Taz versus Jerry the King Lawler. It was pretty much a throwaway 4-minute match, but there's a big debut at the end. Do you remember who it was?
It sounds familiar.
It was a favorite wrestler of yours at the time.
A favorite wrestler of mine at the time.
Maybe still. I don't see why
not. Well, I'm trying like,
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I think you had mentioned earlier that this wrestler debuted. So was it Rey Mysterio?
No, Mysterio was, he came in 2002.
Okay.
For him. This is a guy I know that I met with you a couple of times.
Tommy Dreamer?
No, but very close.
Raven.
That is Raven, yes.
Okay.
Raven debuted. It was one of these things where, like, now anybody, you hear thousands of rumors about every single person coming in at all times, that they make it so obvious. Like, AEW is doing a show next week where a lot of people think that CM Punk is going to be debuting for the company, to the point that he doesn't debut for the company. People are going to be disappointed. Whereas at this point, 2000, there's really not that much going on with the internet and anything. But it was still so much fun because you still had at this point WWE, WCW, and ECW. And Raven was a mainstay for both WCW and ECW. So to see him finally show up in WWE was like, oh my God, it's Raven. This is incredible. And I think that because he jumped prior to those companies shutting down, he had a little bit more of a longer spotlight on him than many of the WCW guys that would come over the year after.
Yeah, and rightly so. But yeah, no, I think that was honestly one of the things that at the end of my kind of really passionate run with wrestling was that there were no surprises anymore. I mean, not that there weren't, but you have the internet, and yeah, you can keep spoilers off and that kind of thing. But when during that high peak 99 to 2005 2006ish, like we're talking no real spoilers, no real like, oh yeah, he's coming, he's going to debut. Like I remember when Chris Jericho debuted and they had that countdown clock, it wasn't really a foregone conclusion that it was going to be him.
There wasn't, yeah.
And he comes back when it was those like weird matrixy, like glitchy video packages.
Right, the Save Us Y2J.
Yeah, like, and that wasn't until like the week before he was gonna come by, because like the first couple of times you see that, it was like, what is going on? What is this?
Right, all the theories and everyone going crazy.
Yeah, so yeah, but I don't remember Raven debuting like that. What do you remember what the circumstances were?
Well, Jerry Lawler was feuding with Taz, so they had a match, and it was a pretty big deal. Matter of fact, if you look at that show, I'd say, main event with Angle and Triple H and The Rock is a huge deal. Undertaker, Kane is a big deal. First TLC is a big deal. And I'd say other than those three matches, Jerry Lawler and Taz was seen as a pretty big deal. I don't even remember why. I think it was, Lawler. I think it was because Lawler at the time, he's the big beloved babyface, kind of creepy. I apologize. Creepy, kind of always horny guy.
Yeah.
It was much certainly from a 2021 lens, but at the same time, he always used to shit on ECW. So now Taz there, and Taz was now a heel, and they had kind of turned him into what would eventually become the commentating character that he did. But it was still like, so you had people who still remembered, hey, Lawler hates ECW, so no one liked him for that. And then here's Taz, and even though he's not the badass anymore, so there's a lot of people who don't really like him because he's just kind of being a douchey heel. But then there's still a segment of the audience that still remember him as the human suplex machine from ECW. So to see Ray go up and help Taz get the win, and he shows up, he hits Lawler with, I think his finish, the Impaler DDT, and I could be wrong on that, but immediately hits the Raven Nevermore kind of deal, and the crowd goes absolutely crazy for it. And not much comes of that. That's kind of just the way he was introduced.
I was gonna say,
but it was a great moment at the time, and it was like, this guy was in WWE in the early 90s as Johnny Polo, like a throwaway manager type character. And then he goes, he recreates himself. He becomes one of the more iconic, fun characters in all of wrestling. I mean, there's a segment of the audience that you talk to, and people will say Raven's in their top 5 still to this day as like in history in terms of like that hardcore scene and being such an interesting character and like, maybe that dark, grungy type character, but also so intelligent that a lot of the things he's saying are, poetic and all these different pieces to it. So to see that character get his opportunity in WWE and would go on at the biggest WrestleMania of the year in WrestleMania 17 to have a triple threat match with Kane and The Big Show for the hardcore title and retain. So it was I think he retained. So, I mean, he had a little decent of a run in WWE, but this debut I thought was great. One of my favorite moments, certainly in SummerSlam history.
Yeah, I think you're definitely onto something, because if I look back and I think, who are my top 5 favorite wrestlers when I was like in the height of wrestling, it's guys like Undertaker, Kane, old school Mankind, like like the Brood, like those edgy goth,
a little bit of a darker character, but there were many layers to the character as well, and so people would be really into him. And of course, we've had 2 meet and greets with Raven that immediately jumped to my head. The first being one where we met him, and he was in the restroom for quite some time, and we thought he had left. And so we were like, we had got there really late to the signing. And then afterwards, he came up from the restroom and was honest with us and was like, sorry, guys, Diddy was calling. I was, taking care of business. And then, we signed for him. I think I still have the photo somewhere of when we met him. And then we met him also at an indie show where you walked in. I think you purchased a shirt from a random vendor who was at the event.
Yeah.
Over, and you were like, hey, Raven, he gave him the shirt to sign. And he was like, oh, that's not my shirt. Where'd you get that? And you were like, right over there. And he looks over at the vendor and was like really unhappy that this guy was selling his shirt, even though he's selling shirts 5 feet away, like at a table itself. But
I don't even remember why I chose that shirt over one that he was selling. Maybe I didn't know that he was selling shirts or something, or I don't know.
Set up like an impromptu meet and greet during intermission. So you bought the shirt, whatever. Yeah.
I mean, can't get mad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but still love the guy.
Yeah. And then obviously SummerSlam 2000, just kind of closing that one out, is probably most remembered in terms of, other than the love triangle with Triple H, Stephanie, and Kurt Angle going into that show, the first ever TLC match, which at the time was like, it had taken everything from the triangle ladder match they had at WrestleMania 2000, and then tables, ladders, and chairs. Oh my! This is the first ever TLC, and now to this day, 21 years later, there's a pay-per-view annually in WWE called TLC.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember when it came out, like when it was announced that that's what it was going to be like. I remember kind of like, all right, I'm not a big fan of ladder matches, particularly when I have to do a ladder match in like No Mercy or something like that when I'm playing the game. Like, I didn't like ladder matches then, but I mean, coming out of this, also like the fact that it was who it is, like those 3 tag teams, the Hardy Boyz, Edge and Christian, and the Dudley Boyz, like iconic. And I think that probably the TLC matches are what made them famous and like made them that legacy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you consider that 5 out of the 6 guys, sorry, Devon, go on to become world champions in different promotions. You had Matt Hardy, who does it in TNA, as well as the ECW brand in WWE. You also have, obviously, Jeff Hardy. He becomes WWE world champion. Edge and Christian, both world champions in WWE. Christian also in TNA and Impact. And then Bubba Ray Dudley goes and becomes Impact World Wrestling Heavyweight Champion as well. So they all spawn off there and have these illustrious careers. And, amazingly, 5 out of the 6 are still wrestling actively today.
Yeah.
He's like a dude in the back agent, but the rest of, I think Bubba's still wrestling from time to time. He now hosts Busted Open, but the 4 of those are still big key cogs. Edge and Jeff Hardy in WWE, and then Christian just had one of the matches of the year a week ago with Kenny Omega, and we'll be wrestling Kenny Omega at the big show for AEW, and then Hardy's in AEW. So they've ended up having all of them such Hall of Fame careers, and yeah, I think you could circle it back to these TLCs, and I think this TLC match is the best of the 3.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a good stuff.
I did also really like the one where it was, I don't remember, it may have been WrestleMania or something, but it was the 3-person tag teams, because it was like it was Hardy Boyz and Lita, it was Ed, Christian and Rhino, and it was the Dudley Boyz with Spike.
That was cool.
That was a good one too.
They really changed things up too.
Yeah, but I mean, like, also, we're talking like the big bumps. This is the one where like Jeff goes, or I think it was either Jeff or Matt, where they go from the ring to the mat where there were the tables, and it's just like that kind of thing. It was unheard of.
Yeah, and you get the idea. I mean, all these guys are in their 20s at this point, so you get the idea they're all standing back there going, wanting to do the biggest bump of the entire show. Like the mindset of these guys, like now they're all in their 40s. And I'm sure they're all like much more cautious, but back then it's like you're trying to do everything you can to make a name for yourself during the biggest portion of wrestling history at this point, the Attitude Era, where wrestling's so popular. You've got to do everything you can to make a name for yourself. And these guys didn't give a shit. They were just throwing caution to the wind, doing everything they can to stand out.
And I think it was also partially because of how popular ECW had become. This is obviously, was ECW still around at the time, or they're gone by the
final year? Yeah, they ended up ending, I think, in 2001 as well. Could be wrong.
Okay, but still, like, it, they're still massively popular. It's still like that is some of the most popular stuff in the Attitude Era. The TLC matches, the hardcore matches, like these no holds barred matches, like that, those were the most popular.
Yeah, oh, for sure. If we move on here, and I know we're coming up with the 20th anniversary of 2001. That's always one for me that I don't recall the most of. I know there's some great matches on that show, but I think I just really I hated the Invasion era. I just hated it so much. I wasn't emotionally connected to too many of the WCW guys. And so, while I do love the Austin Angle match on that show, I think for me, unless you have anything on that one, 2002 is such a good show. But do you have anything on 2002?
Not really, because the Invasion, just to talk about that for a second, was always like, it's an interesting one, because I think that was one of the first times where it would, like, at least on a personal experience, like I was trying to distinguish between what was actually going on versus what the kayfabe version of it versus all that stuff. Because, obviously the kayfabe version is, like Stephanie and Shane teaming up because they had just bought WCW and ECW and bringing all that stuff in and blah, 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 and going up against Vince. But then knowing that behind the scenes, it's just WWE bought them and they just need a way to introduce all of this talent. So here you go.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it became tough because it became like, rather than, hey, I really like Chris Kanyon, it was like, hey, Chris Canyon's thrown in with 15 other guys from WCW and they're team WCW. So there was never, with the exception of like the Hurricane, who made a name for himself, a couple other guys here and there, Booker T clearly, but he's Booker T. People knew him anyway. But if you were not an established guy, it was really tough to kind of get yourself over, especially because they came in with Rhino and RVD and Tommy Dreamer. And those guys were so much cooler and so much bigger of a deal than
Right.
most of the W were.
Well, because it also felt like the B team of WCW, like there was no Goldberg, there was no Hogan, Nash, like there was no real it's like, imagine if it's like, all right, we're gonna put the Justice League up against the Avengers, but it's not Captain America or Iron Man or Incredible Hulk. It's gonna be the B and the C team Avengers. Like, it's gonna be like Hawkeye and a couple of other, like Hawkeye's the big one. That's
Right.
your big guy, and then it's just other people that are working there, and he's just like bringing them all in against like Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman.
Yeah, that would be rough.
It's like that's what it felt like, because you had WWE or WWF at the time, like they were it was Undertaker, Kane, it was the big guys that were around then.
Right.
And that, I feel like that's also why they had to have Stone Cold jump over to WCW and like turn, because it was like, we don't have anybody else to lead this.
Yeah, and you're right, it'd be the equivalent of, the Justice League then sending over Batman to go ahead and team up with the Avengers. And it'd be like, he's the face of DC. How can you have him go over to, it doesn't make any sense. So, interesting stuff. But yeah, I mean, it really a weird time period. But the good news is that once that did end, it becomes one of my favorite years of WWE, and that being 2002. And probably the 2002 SummerSlam. For me, it has such a big place in my heart just because it's the first ever live pay-per-view I'd ever been to. I remember just becoming like overwhelmed and with goosebumps and everything you could possibly think of. Because fast forward, rewinding back 4 years, 1998 it's held at Madison Square Garden.
Mm-hmm.
Tried all they could, God bless them, to get tickets. But it was like back then there wasn't a million ways to do it. So if you didn't get tickets, it was sold out. So we didn't have the opportunity to go, and I had friends who did go, and so knowing, that's the highway to hell, I'm singing that song throughout the whole summer. My sister and I are doing that as we go down like the dark rides in Wet and Wild. Everybody is pumped up for that show. That's Austin versus Undertaker, Rock versus Triple H in a ladder match that really kind of cements both guys as main eventers. And at the same time, now you fast forward again now to 4 years later. Now we have another opportunity to go, and now I have tickets. So I got to go to my very first SummerSlam, and I've been to, I want to say 5 different SummerSlams. This will be the 6th. So we're neck and neck here with WrestleMania and SummerSlam with the amount of shows. I've been to so many. I feel like sometimes it's insane. But 2002 for me was also just, it was not the norm. So the idea that you're going to your first ever pay-per-view, I remember the lights came off in the beginning of the arena, and they put up that warning sign for the no recording anything that you typically would. The place just goes nuts and screams, like everyone's just so pumped up. And that show, you had their own theme song they did for it, the I Will Fight to the Bitter, that WWE kind of did like their own song for SummerSlam 2002.
I don't even remember that.
Yeah, it was nutty. And that show, I mean, you talk about what it's known for, which is your 3 biggest matches, which is, Rock versus Brock, which they spent the entire summer building up. Brock Lesnar wins King of the Ring. The whole summer is building towards that. You have Triple H versus Shawn Michaels in Shawn Michaels' return match for the first time in over 4 years. You also have, in his first pay-per-view match, Rey Mysterio, who wasn't a part of that original invasion. He comes to Kurt Angle in an incredible opening match. And then your undercard features Eddie Guerrero versus Edge, Chris Jericho versus Ric Flair, Chris Benoit versus RVD, and hell, I'll throw it in there, Undertaker versus Test. I mean, you have so many. What a card that is.
So that is a solid card. And is this I have a vague memory of. So was this Mysterio's debut, or was this he had already been in?
I think he was there. He might have done an appearance or two on SmackDown. I think they had that one time where he does the big jump off the ladder on the Un-Americans.
Okay.
Yeah, but I might be wrong. It might be his first actual match.
Okay. So then this isn't what I'm thinking of, because I remember there is a match early on where, I think I might be. I think it may have happened at SummerSlam, but maybe not this one, because I think this was like maybe Mysterio versus Eddie, where it was like something like they were basically wrestling for Dominic.
Yeah,
They were wrestling for like guardianship of Dominic, something like it was something weird.
That was at 2005.
2005. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So a couple of
custody of Dominic up on a ladder, and they had a ladder match, and whoever
yeah,
won got.
Yeah, there was a suitcase and everything like that. And it's crazy to think that 16 years later, he's a wrestler now. Like but you watch that one and he's like a little kid, like tiny.
Yeah, they're actually Mattel is making an elite young Dominic from 2005, which is insane. But
with the frosted tip hair and like everything like that, and like
it's crazy. But this match here is probably best known for memory that comes to my mind. The referee is counting out Angle on the outside. He's counting him down because Kurt Angle's getting counted out.
Uh-huh.
Mysterio bounces off the ropes, leaps over the referee onto the outside, and lands on Angle. And I remember, oh my God. And even though Rey loses the match and people are unhappy about that, it was something that and I don't think it mattered because he was in there with Kurt Angle and had a great match with him. And I think he cemented his spot in WWE because he was on that show with Angle.
Yeah, and I feel like always like when there's a match that there's not any sort of actual stipulation, or it's not for a belt or something like that, as long as it's a good match, like this is me saying this now, when I'm heavily invested in a storyline and when I'm that mark when I was 20 years ago, I would absolutely care who won. But in that kind of match, like looking back, like one way or the other, it sounds like a fantastic match.
Yeah. And then Triple H and Shawn Michaels, I think it's still one of the best top 5 matches in SummerSlam history. It's probably my favorite match in SummerSlam history, simply because I did not expect anything from it. I think I went into the match nervous. I was like, oh my God, this is too much. Shawn shouldn't be wrestling.
Right.
Ahead, he gets the big. He gets, not only does he have a great match with Triple H, but he gets the win. And then Hunter hits him in the back with the sledgehammer, which to me said, okay, now he's gone. That's it. He's back for the one match, and he's gone. I think that was probably their plan. Was this is only going to be one match, because on the DVD for SummerSlam 2002, they have a Bite This where Shawn Michaels talks about how this is his only match. He wants to come back for one more singles match. Maybe he'll do a tag down the road, but this is it. And I think it just went so well that he was like, screw it, I'm coming back. And he signs a big contract and ends up being
for the next 20 years. Like,
it's crazy. But yeah, that match was great. And then the main event, Brock Lesnar and The Rock. And it was this was the precursor to the John Cena getting booed out of the building as your top face. Rock started getting out of the building because WWE fans were having none of the idea that he was going to Hollywood. So I remember the crowd all over him. The movie that eventually becomes Walking Tall was supposed to be called something else. And so they're chanting that at The Rock the whole time. And at the end of the show, when it goes off the air, Brock wins, and it's like the celebration for the ages. But then afterwards, and it's at Nassau Coliseum, the building we both graduated high school in, so it's near and dear, to say the least. And Steve, I think you might have frozen. I don't know if we hear you. Hang on. Let's see here. Oh.
Am I good? Can you hear me?
Now I hear you. You're back. But maybe we should come out and then let's see here. Let's see if we could recover this. All right. Looks like you're okay. But yeah, Rock gets on the mic, and it ends up being a situation where Rock says he gets on at the end of the show and he does the finally. And for a while, even if people booed him, once he got on the mic and did finally, they would turn back and be on The Rock's side again. But he does finally, they boo him, they boo him, they boo him. He keeps going, finally, and he gets more and more angry. And then he goes, finally, The Rock gets to get the hell out of Long Island. And the crowd just shits all over him. And he's gone until he returns as Hollywood Rock, the heel in 2003. So really, really good show and really strong stuff. Any memories you have of the SummerSlams thereafter?
The only one that I really remember at least now, is the one that was in 2009, because it was my very last pay-per-view really that I watched.
Well, let's not forget that in 2007, we go to a SummerSlam together.
That's true.
I mean, it was probably the worst SummerSlams of all time. We going from the best SummerSlam in 2002 until the worst SummerSlam 5 years later, one of them, which isn't as bad of a show, but I think it goes to show, and it's something you've always been good at, is I got some awful seats for this show. This was like tippy. Well, also, so we should probably even circle, but this is WWE is going into SummerSlam 2007, and they've launched this campaign because they're trying to do everything they can to repair their image, because this is right after Benoit dies.
Okay.
And so the main event of that SummerSlam was supposed to be Umaga versus the cast of Jackass. But then when Benoit dies, all of the Jackass, well, it wasn't all of them, Johnny Knoxville pulls out because he had a burgeoning career in Hollywood. So without Johnny Knoxville, WWE didn't want the cast of Jackass. So instead, they end up doing the first meeting between John Cena and Randy Orton. But instead, to get people excited, they went on a search for their biggest fan. So I was like the most hyped I'd ever been for a show. I went to this like karaoke party in the city with like all the WWE superstars at the time. I don't think you came to meet with me to that.
That sounds right.
And then there's like there was a deal where MVP was there signing, Mr. Kennedy was there signing, and Mr. Kennedy got pissed at the venue for continuing to let people in. And MVP said, "Let them all in. If he wants to leave, no one's here to see him anyway." But the best part about that is Kennedy was upset because he had an appearance on a newscast the next morning where he went on to defend WWE for their strict drug testing policy. Fast forward 2 weeks later, he gets popped for steroids, and he's suspended for that. So it was just like such a crazy, crazy time.
Yeah.
Going into that SummerSlam, I remember that when the last event was like this big party at the venue that we all went to, where I want to say it was Crime Time, Christmas, Ric Flair, and Matt Stryker, who were all signing autographs.
Yeah.
Stryker, we all knew because he was a teacher at our school.
Yeah.
And so didn't you even mention it to him?
I mentioned it to him, and it was one of those things where it was like looking back, I wanted to bring my yearbook because he's in my yearbook.
Right.
And I'm like, I think I said something to him too. And he was like, "Oh, maybe next time." And then I don't think he's ever heard from again. But
but it was so random. And Ric Flair doesn't even acknowledge us because he's chatting and laughing and chuckling, flirting with girls, and like just being Ric Flair. So like even though we met him, he literally is like, if you were talking to me, he's just like, "Here you go, kid. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And like doesn't even look at us at all, which is like so Ric Flair, and one of the reasons I've just never been a huge fan.
Also, just because I've never found him to be entertaining, but that's maybe me.
No, I mean, you know what? I'll be honest. Because I didn't really WCW, I didn't really that era. But once he came to WWE, I loved him as the manager for Evolution, and also when he was managing Charlotte Flair. So those are my two times where I really was into Ric Flair. But yeah, I mean, I thought, and then Crime Time were like they were awesome. Though they were really cool, and we loved. We were doing that. Money. Yeah. Every single, that was our like thing for that summer, was talking about.
Yeah, they were so over, at least in our group. Like
we'd always ask people to pay for a bill and do, "I need that money. Yeah. And that was like our thing for the whole time.
I just also remember they had a bunch of like the backstage, clips and like all that kind of stuff. All of those were always great.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're such an entertaining act. God bless Shad Gaspard, unfortunately, last year, right in the beginning of COVID, he ends up passing away trying to save his son who was drowning, and does save his son, but in the process dies. Really, really sad stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, that was a great memory. And I think then because we were so amped, I think we even went to like an independent show the night before that was headlined by Bryan Danielson and Takeshi Morishima for Ring of Honor. So we're all amped up, and then we got to this show. We've got tickets all the way in the boondocks, way behind the stage, And it was the show that like everyone was so amped for Randy Orton to finally win the title and beat John Cena. And we were so ready to just be behind John Cena. And Orton hits the RKO, and everybody is, I mean, this is like, people are Randy Orton chanting when you're on the line getting into the venue. This guy was like the guy everyone wanted, and he hit the RKO, and everyone's up. 1, 2, Cena kicks out, jumps up, grabs Orton, hits him with the FU 1, 2, 3, and Cena retains. And it was so deflating. That might have drawn you right off of being a wrestling fan right then and there at that venue.
That was probably like one of those like beginning of the end moments.
Yeah. I mean,
because like, exactly.
We also didn't have the greatest company with us at that time too. It was nothing probably add to it. I'd say that 2009 show, not only is it great because it's a show that, reminds me so much of, it's the last show for you as a fan, but during that show you came over, you had a barbecue outside, and that's the famous show where my dad was excited to see you. I don't think we had seen each other much at the time. So my dad was so excited to see you that he was like, hey, Steve, let's head in and catch up. So you and my dad left us all out there and went and sat there and caught up and chatted. Right. It was very random, but it was really cool.
Yeah. And it was like, it was kind of, it was funny because I remember your dad not really liking a lot of your friends, but for some reason he absolutely loved me. So
yeah, it was very interesting, and also at the time too, that show, that SummerSlam show, I think it was you, it was my dad, it was a couple other people, and like pretty much none of the entire team at that point, the whole crew was watching wrestling other than me. So it was interesting to watch a show with people, but it is main evented by CM Punk and Jeff Hardy, getting back to the idea of them taking a chance with two people. And it felt like Jeff Hardy at that point was so hot. I had gone through, and I start losing a ton of weight at this point because my Halloween costume that year was going to be Jeff Hardy. And so I did it, and in the process ended up getting swine flu. You and I were coaching youth basketball.
Yep.
That fall.
Yeah.
And the opposing coach ended up getting swine flu because I lost so much weight that my immune system was destroyed because I didn't want to be a fat Jeff Hardy for Halloween. And that guy died, which was like, he had swine flu and passed away, which was insane.
Yeah, like crazy time that.
And but yeah, that swine flu thing was like, that was the hot minute COVID-19.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seemed like there was, a couple of those years back to back where it was like, bird flu, swine flu, like all those different kinds of things but I mean, obviously nowhere near the scale of what we've been going through the past year and a half, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. Moving along, I'll just touch on two more SummerSlam stories. 2013, big time period for myself because my wife and I, we start dating in the end of 2012. And so 2013, it's like, I'm a huge fan, and I'm like, I'd love to get her involved as a fan because, like, who doesn't dream of having somebody who's going to be into your passion with you? So this debuts on E, and her friends are chatting about Total Divas, like at dinner with girls' night. They're all talking about Total Divas. So I see this as an opening to be like, oh my God, hey, John Cena, who's dating Nikki Bella, and Daniel Bryan, who's dating Brie Bella, are going to be facing each other in a big match at SummerSlam. Let's go to LA and go. And she's like, let's do it. So we went to LA, and first time I'd ever been even on the West Coast, let alone LA. And went all the way there for that SummerSlam, which was an awesome show with Daniel Bryan versus John Cena, as well as CM Punk against Brock Lesnar. And that was a time period where WWE had 5 straight years where they did SummerSlam in LA. And then after 2014, they switched it and did 4 straight years of SummerSlam here in New York City, which was incredible. And I still say to this day, even though I absolutely did not like the job I had at the time, which was in Brooklyn, because of how much fun the annual summer trip to SummerSlam was and being a part of it, I feel like if WWE never moved SummerSlam out of Brooklyn, I'd still be working at that place in Brooklyn, getting excited to go to SummerSlam every year because it felt like you were just a part of such a great community.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually right, 2013 is when we moved down to Florida. So that it also seems like everything is then, coming full circle now with you guys going out to Vegas. And is this going to be your first time in Vegas too?
We went to Vegas one other time. It was very brief though. It was for a friend's birthday party. So it's our first time going for an extended period of time. It's going to be an interesting balance between, the wrestling. But what's good about the wrestling is that, really there's just SummerSlam. There isn't 100 other events. So
Right.
there won't be patient for me to try to squeeze anything else in. The only other thing they have is the Superstore, which we're going to do, which we go visit the Superstore and get your merchandise. That's always like a good hype thing for the show. But it'll be interesting balance between trying to do things together as a couple and then having the family there, my mom with the baby, and trying to do that. It's kind of our first big trip where we are going away as a family with not the intention of just being all about our daughter, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you don't mind, what other kind of stuff do you have planned?
So we definitely want to do one of the day parties at one of the pool, like the pool party, everything going on there, looking at a couple of different pool parties. I kind of leave that up to my wife because she, if I book the wrong party, it'd be the end of me. But then I think we're going to go to a club at night and go check out Lil Jon. I think he's going to be performing some of his DJ set and performing to the Windows Peter Wild, which will be a great show. It will be a great song for us. We'll be excited about that. And then obviously we want to go see the Sign because it's my mom's first time ever in Vegas. So you want to Sign. I think we're going to do the zip lining through Old Vegas, which will be fun. We're going to try to see the Hoover Dam and have an outdoorsy type day as well. And then because there's so many people in town for both SummerSlam and the Pacquiao fight, which is the same city, same night, there's so many people in town, you can't get a flight out on Sunday from Vegas. So we have to wake up early Sunday morning and drive down to Phoenix, Arizona, and we'll spend the final day in Phoenix, which is a great city, and then take the flight out of Phoenix through the night. And then Monday I arrive at 6:30 at JFK, and then I have to drive out to Stanford for work for 9 a.m.
Wow.
I don't know how I plan.
Wow. Good luck.
Crazy.
Good luck. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, it's going to be nuts. We're taking off on Wednesday and flying directly right out of New York. And then there's a flight to Chicago. And then we have a little turnover. And then we're in Vegas pretty early Wednesday. So it'll be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Variety of things. We also want to go see all the different pieces of the Strip since it's my mom's first time going.
Oh, yeah.
Shows at night, those different types of deals where you can see the shows in the different venues. And it'll be fun to see. And then it all leads up to, Roman Reigns and John Cena on Saturday night for SummerSlam. I'm excited for it. And being able to be at the new Allegiant Stadium where the Raiders are going to play this year is going to be fun.
That was going to be my next question is where is it going to take place? But that's really cool.
Yeah, it's the first time they've done a SummerSlam at a stadium since 1992, where they did it in Wembley Stadium, which is a little old school there, but they did it in London, England. So it's exciting. And part of that is because WWE had the two different shows at WrestleMania, but they couldn't have full capacity for those shows. Sorry. So never one to lose an opportunity to make money. They said, hey, let's go balls to the wall for all things SummerSlam. Full capacity. Let's go. Football stadium. And here we are.
Yeah. And I mean, Vegas was one of the first places to kind of start to reopen, right? So,
And I'm a little nervous with this Delta variant. That's certainly with a 1-year-old. It's a little nerve-wracking, but hopefully it's on the up and up and we're able to get through it.
Yeah. Well, good luck. And, hope everything goes well and you guys stay safe and all that. But yeah, it sounds like you guys are going to have a great time.
Absolutely, and this was a lot of fun. Little trip down memory lane here, looking back at some of the old SummerSlam memories and a lot of memories of our friendship through the years as well. Great to remember my dad who loves SummerSlam. He always looked for that as an opportunity to barbecue and bring over people. And when you were my best man at my wedding, we talked about that moment with my dad asking you to come inside and catch up kind of randomly there. So always great times, great memories, and that's the best part about wrestling is having these times that bring people together, at least for me, and kind of go from there. So, am I still on here?
You blipped out for a second, right in the middle of your heartfelt.
I know. Thing about how wrestling brings us all together and kind of ties into all these great family and these great moments and great memories, and that's what's fun about it. I mean, this family vacation that we have planned is all centered around SummerSlam. And I'm really pumped for it. It feels like WrestleMania season. First time going to a wrestling show for me now in over 2 years. And so it'll be fun. And the vlog will be right here on the channel. So if you guys are at home, you'll be able to catch up on that and enjoy the trip along with us.
I can't wait to watch that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Steve. Not sure we're going to be back with our the remainder of our Tough Enough next week, but if not,